which organizations did you first get involved with?
At that time, there was a gay community center located someplace around where Temple de Hirsch is now. I don't remember the exact address, but sort of 16th south of Madison, that general area. And it was, one of these old Seattle houses. It's, I'm sure, long since been torn down. And I went there to find out what was going on, and the young guy that I spoke to was very nice and sizing me up in terms of age and being a professor at the UW and so forth. He said to me, there's a group that you should actually contact called the Dorian Group, and let me give you the contact information for Charlie Bryden, who is one of the main figures in it. So I contacted Charlie, and I went to some of the things that he planned, and my response to what they were doing, the Dorians were doing, was actually very mixed. In one sense, I was really glad that there was a group, a gay-identified group, gay and lesbian-identified group, that was public and was participating in public debates and discussions that were going on. But their politics were more conservative than where I was at and where I was comfortable being and operating. So this contradiction that I felt vis-a-vis the Dorians is illustrated to me by example that when there were issues on the ballot for school bonds, Charlie and the Dorian Group were always very prominently urging gays and lesbians to support it even if we didn't have kids, and talked about the fact that we have to assume certain responsibilities as members of our communities and so forth, which was a very, to me, positive, progressive, and exemplary kind of position. On the other hand, Charlie asked me if I'd be interested in being their lobbyist down in Olympia, and I realized that in many ways doing that would compromise values or principles that I held in terms of positions they would be taking, which would be more cautious and so forth than I would feel comfortable with. So I didn't stay very active with the Dorians, but I always supported their work. Now at that time, Seattle had passed these two early ordinances in the late 70s on non-discrimination in housing and in what's the other one? Was the other one in employment? Right, thank you, employment and housing. So there was very soon thereafter a reaction initiative to try to repeal these things, and like many other people who were here at the time and who had a political consciousness, I got involved in activities to oppose. It was Initiative 13, as I recall, was the thing. And there were actually three groups that were opposing, which illustrates the kind of political divide, although we were unified in the sense of our goals and we didn't trash each other. There was the group that was more mainstream, let's say, and in that sense a little bit more conservative. And there were two more radical groups, one mixed gender and one was called Women Against 13, as I recall. So at the same time, a prominent gay guy who was employed by the ACLU convinced me to get considered to be a member of the ACLU of Washington board. I had done work with the ACLU when I was back at Cornell. There was a chapter in upstate New York that handled matters over several counties. And on the behalf of the ACLU, for example, I took one of the few times as a lawyer that I've ever actually argued in court, I took a case up through the New York State courts on behalf of someone at Attica arguing that he was deprived of his due process rights because he and his lawyer had not gotten access to the pre-sentencing report that was done on him before the actual sentencing. It was at the practice at that time to just spring these documents and things on the defendant and the defense attorneys. And very often, as in this case, they were full of errors and all. So I had an ACLU background. I got involved in the ACLU here in Seattle in the Washington State affiliate. And of course the ACLU of Washington was involved in promoting gay rights, and it actually took one of the country's very, very earliest gay rights marriage cases long before it was a real public policy issue. So that was the kind of early phases of my activism for gay rights in